Hey, what is going on? I hope that everyone is having a phenomenal week, phenomenal weekend whenever you're finally getting a chance to enjoy this stream. Um, First things first, I'm gonna have to say that this is this is a episode that I've actually been wanting to do for some time now. The whole idea around this, I'm gonna talk. I'm going to talk a lot about here, I guess, on the June 16th, there was um, a meeting with the Federal Reserve that they talked a lot about um, what they are planning for us to sort of get the economy back going, back booming. The Federal Open Market Committee discussing how interest rates are going to be. And I'm not going to get into all the technical jargon. I'm really wanting this episode to give you a true insight into what you can expect. I think that's the biggest takeaway, and I want to be very personable with you. I want to be very real with you. I want to give you just put you inside of my thoughts for a little bit for next 30 or so minutes, and just give you some guidance, give you a little encouragement. I think that's sometimes needed when people start to think that their emotions are getting a little out of whack. I think that people are going to react. There's going to be some reactionary type of things going on. And I think that's the important part, and I think that's the reason why this episode is very much needed, especially at this time, right? I've always said I want to make you a knowledgeable person around finances, because I think that people that are knowledgeable around their finances, they have the ability to make the decisions that are best for them. So I could sit here and tell you everything that I do. I could sit here and tell you and go through all of these things about how you could do your finances, how you could, make this decision, make this decision. I could say buy this stock. I could say buy this mutual. I could do all that, right? But the problem with that is that your goal is not the same as my goal, and that's not the same as your friend or your coworker's goal, right? So I think that it's a huge opportunity with everything that's going on. I think it's a huge opportunity for you to start to take this moment to really get your finances in order, because I do think there will be some hiccups and some bumps along the way. I honestly do. I don't think that there's a slight chance that this is not going to cause some bumps. I know that we'll get through everything that's happening. I'm confident in that. I'm not really concerned at this very moment. I know some people are panicking. I know some people are concerned. I think I saw a recent report that shows about 70%, just north of 70% of Americans are very concerned with the current spending that is being conducted by our federal government. I think that it also went on to state that there's some extreme discomfort that's coming with that spending. So I think this is a relevant episode. I hope that you take away what I'm really going to put down for you today, because there's a lot to unpack here, and I don't want to waste anyone's time. But the biggest thing is that this could be a super technical episode. I could go through here and I could bore you with a bunch of financial jargon, but that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to break this down and make this super simple so that you can understand what exactly it is that's going on. Okay. So let's get right in. The first thing up, so I saw this as a tweet right after the meeting happened. Recap of the last federal meeting for anyone that's listening to this on a podcast. Pretty much these two like Popeye sailor looking guys, and they're pretty much shoveling cash into a furnace, right? So I thought that was pretty comical just to see that. And just throw that up on the screen during the stream. But but ultimately, that's sort of how a lot of people are thinking. A lot of people are feeling right now. They're feeling like that we're increasing our federal debt, right? We've had three stimulus packages that have gone out now. I'm going to discuss that here in a little bit. We've had three stimulus packages that have gone out since COVID came, and definitely took a hit on the world in general, not just our country, but in the world in general. And so if you're listening to this from another country, I'm sure COVID had an impact on you as well. So it's impacting a lot, right? But the big thing is that here in the United States with our federal government, they did three stimulus packages, and that has changed some things, right? Like that we will have, there will be lasting effects that happen because of that. I do not want to discredit. I don't want to take this time to discredit some of the help that it provided a lot of Americans, but I do want it always to be in the forefront of your mind that every decision comes at some consequence, right? And every decision comes at giving something else up. You have to make that decision. That's the reason why it's a decision. There was two options, and you went with one, and there was consequences that came with that one that we're technically you'll see some hurt and grief on the back end for not making the other decision. But I think that the biggest part of all of this is understanding how that, first off, the stimulus money affected supply and demand, how it affected inflation, and ultimately how all of the federal assistance that has come, how that has impacted our country, right? And I think that's a big piece to hit. So first off, as I started this is not meant to be super technical and jargon. The second thing is it's not meant to be super political. I'm not here to tell you how you should think or how you should feel. I'm only here to give you my opinions, thoughts, and bring up some facts that I have, some data to support some of the things that I think are pertinent to speak on with the current federal guidelines and mandates that are in place. But everything I show is from government websites that are data that they've collected, and I'm going to use that, whether it be the labor bureau, the statistics for labor, if there's anything. Every single piece that I've got is from a government resource that is their data. So I'm not picking and choosing news sources. I'm not doing anything. I'm just going off of what the facts and what the charts and what the data says, and we're going with that. Okay. So first off, I'm going to start off with, I want to bring up what exactly. So the goal is here. I've got up the meeting notes from lost my train of thought. The meeting notes that the Federal Open Market Committee discussed on the 16th. Going to go through the Forbes Advisor is the meeting notes that I'm using for this episode. So if you do watch the episode, I do have the on the screen. I do have the meeting notes up, and I'm going to go through each individual part of the major highlights that was discussed and just give you a breakdown of sort of what that means and what you can take from it. At the end of this episode, I'm going to go over some things that you can do to better facilitate yourself. I've got some good outlines of things that you can do to better yourself, better your family, and also put your finances in the best order possible. So with that, I'm going to jump right in. So first off, inflation. Inflation is, in normal people terms, is where you have an excess of demand, right? So you have an excess of demand that is trying to purchase a good or a service, and there is not enough supply to provide that, right? So one success story of this is like Harley Davidson, right? Harley Davidson, when first released, had a huge demand for their motorcycle, right? But there wasn't a lot of supply. So what in their case, what that ended up doing was it ended up driving this innate desire to want this prestigious motorcycle. But in our economy side, when we look at this whole demand and supply deal, it's important to notice and important to note that when you have this huge demand with supply, this huge demand that's outdoing your supply, what ends up happening is they end up having to drive cost up so that the demand can decrease, right? Because right now, if you had, if everyone could afford this $10 item and you want to decrease the amount of people wanting to buy that $10 item, well, you got to make that $10 item now $50 or whatever, right? So that's the whole idea, is that you can increase cost of goods that lowers the demand, because not as many people can, they'll say, oh, well, that's too much. I don't want to pay $50 for that item. I only want to pay 10. And so you end up being able to take away some of your prospective buyers that way. So we're seeing this currently for a multitude of reasons. So our first topic is inflation, because inflation is rising. All right. So we're seeing this for a multitude of reasons, but I'm going to talk specifically a few. One reason is the stimulus money that was given. So 3 stimulus checks, as I spoke to before. That was the first one, the first piece that sort of anteed this whole thing up, right? Because now there's more money, right? So more people can do more things with their money. And this creates an economy that's driven by this demand. More people have more money and they're going to want more goods or services. Well, during the pandemic, the goods and services were not as available, right? So you had decrease in productivity pretty much across the board, from restaurants to we're seeing automobile decrease in productivity. We're seeing decreases in building materials. You'll hear a lot about the wood and the other building material shortages that are going on due to a lack of productivity. But those are things that are going to ultimately drive this whole concept of people having more money. So that's increasing the demand, which is driving up in the inflated cost of the goods and services. So I have up on this chart, this was done by the Peter G. Peterson Foundation. I have up this chart, and it says households were more likely to spend their first stimulus check and save or pay off debt with their second and third. So what that shows me is, a little bit into the spending patterns, spending habits of people, right? So they got this money in the first stimulus package, and I don't recall all the timelines. If I'm not mistaken, the first stimulus package is like April, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So the first stimulus check comes out, and a majority of people spend it. Now, the thing that I want to talk about on this chart, so in this case, CARES Act money was the first check. 74% spent the money. Now, this is the part that I read through here, and there was not much that talked about. Let's see. While many households reported they still used or planned on using part of those later payments for expenses like food and rent, only about 1/5 of the household indicated they used money primarily for those purposes. So 74% spent the money, right? And so I think that's a huge deal when you think about that first check. It doesn't say what they spent it on so much. Like maybe they spent it on, things they needed around the house. Maybe they spent it on whatever, but 11% paid off debt and 14% saved it. So you're looking at about 25% paid off debt and saved it, and the others spent it. Now, we don't know what they spent it on, so we'll digress. The other two, I'm not even focused mostly on that first stimulus check. I'm focused on the second and third because almost 50% used it to pay off debt, right? Which could have been debt that was accumulated through the first couple months of the pandemic. Makes sense. Maybe they were they had, weren't very sound financially. Maybe they lost their job and they were putting things on credit cards. Like, who knows? I don't know your situation. I'm not here to judge your situation. What I'm here to do is just provide analysis. So with this, you had about 32% on the first and second and third check that was saved. And that's a huge piece because that's people putting away money that didn't need it, and they're putting it away for a rainy day, right? So now that more jobs are available, people are going back to work, pandemic sort of, I say the pandemic's over. Some people don't agree, and that's fine. But the pandemic is over, winding down, however you want to look at it. And more people are getting back to work and they're getting a steady income. So now we're seeing this huge inflation drive because more people are having all of this money saved that they now may be wanting to spend, right? Driving inflation in the market. So all that's to say that the excess amount of money that was provided through federal assistance is definitely driving a lot of inflation in the markets, and it's due to people having extra cash, saved or whatever, that they are now back to work and they now have as excess money, right? And they're spending it on things they either want or need, right? So the biggest part that we have, and I'm gonna go straight over into the 12-month CPI, or Consumer Price Index, is that we've seen the Consumer Price Index, which is pretty much just this average percentage of how the market is or how costs are increasing, right? And that's the biggest thing. So you can see that I've got up on the screen that all items are about at a 5% inflation percentage than 12 months ago, right? So that's the biggest takeaway that I want you to remember is the 5%, because when you think back to the housing market or the financial crisis in 2008 and that decline, we were at a 5.6% when that huge drop off happened, and we actually went into a more deflated state, getting down to about negative 1.4%. So that talks a lot, and that means a lot, because when we're talking inflation and we're talking about our market getting driven by a lot of key components as we're trying to open this market back up, we're trying to get the economy back booming, we're trying to get everything back on track, we're trying to get people back to work, we're trying to get just money flowing through, supply and demand just meeting each other, precisely and direct. This CPI, this Consumer Price Index percentage, means a lot, because at a certain point, prices are going to inflate to where people can no longer afford some of the basic needs and necessities of life, right? So that's where this whole thing becomes an issue, is basically when does that percentage so high that you've now priced a lot of people out of the necessities that they were accustomed to. Now, can you still live? Yes, of course. You downsize your life and you can still make things happen, but you living without changing anything, how high does inflation get before people begin to have to downsize because of the simple fact they've been outpriced in their necessities? So that's a huge component, and that was discussed in the meeting. A lot of what's talked about when you this is sort of going to roll me into the end of this. I'm gonna tie a lot of this together, but that's going to tie a lot into how we see what the federal government is going to do. And like I said, I'm going to tie that up at the end so you can sort of see what the federal government's going to do to sort of combat the inflation, and then what they're not going to do. There's some things they're not going to do, and I'm going to get right to that. So going over the next part that they discussed is the jobs market. So I've talked about inflation. I've talked about how the cost is driving up due to the high demand and the low supply. But let's talk about the job market, because I don't agree with the fact that they came out and said that there's a disappointing job market. I don't agree with that statement, and their facts don't line up with that statement. So up on the chart, I've got a chart that goes over unemployment rate from January 2020 to pretty much May 2021. That's the last month that we have stats for currently. So what I want you to see, if you're looking at the chart, and I'm gonna walk you through it by talking. What I want you to see is this huge uptrend. So you can see the pandemic, right? You can look at this chart and you can see the pandemic, because around March, when March 2020, COVID hit the United States hard, you can see us go from about a 5% unemployment rate up to just south of a 15%, 14.8% in April 2020. So you see tons of people unemployed at that point. And then, I mean, it peaks. On this chart, it peaks. And it comes sloping down, okay? And it's sort of flatlining right now. We're at about a 6%, and we've been hanging out around 6% for the last couple months. But you still see a steady decline. It's still coming down. January 2021, 6.3%. February, 6.2%. March, 6.0%. April, ticked back up 6.1%, and in May we're down to 5.8% unemployment rate. So disappointing jobs market, that's debatable. I don't think that the market was going to react perfectly and let's just go right back to normal. I didn't expect that, but I want you to look at this. I'm going to flip over to the next chart, and this is our job openings chart. And if you looked at the unemployment rate chart and you flipped it upside down, it would look almost identical. Look at this. Almost identical to the job openings chart, which you would correlate those two to say, well, if those look identical, you should see some kind of correlation. But here's the thing. So obviously, you right here, you should be able to see let me backtrack. November 2020 job openings took a little dip. They've been hanging out around 4.5%. Around that same time, our unemployment rate was up around 7%, so 6.7 to be exact. So I want to be clear though that there were jobs available and people were unemployed, and that's the part that when looking at this chart, that's the part that can be a little deceiving, because when you get more into today's time, you can start to see that there are, looking at our second chart, we're at 5.4% job openings in March with a 6% unemployment rate. Going into May, we have a projected 6% job openings, but a 5.8% unemployment rate. So you see that we've crossed the median of job openings to unemployment rate. So now it shows that there's jobs available, but people are not going back to work. And so that leads you to question. There's tons of ideas out there of why that is, and why people are not going to work. Some people say, well, they make more money staying at home through the different subsidies that the government's providing. There's tons of ideas out there, but why people are not going back to work, don't know. Not really my swim lane, because everyone that's listening to this probably is in tune with their finances enough that they know that for long-term growth and wealth development, you cannot use federal government subsidies to get you there. So I think I'm preaching to a choir if I sit here and went over, why that is and why there's a cross and why there's more jobs available than opening, or why there's more jobs available than people unemployed. But that's that. So that's the second piece I hit. And so it says disappointing jobs market, but I disagree in the simple fact that their stats and their charts don't paint that picture. It doesn't paint the picture that we have a disappointing jobs market when there's more jobs available than people unemployed. So final thing that I want to talk about is the Federal Reserve and the inflation. So the biggest thing that the Federal Reserve has stated is that they are going to not touch, they are not going to touch the interest rates, and they're going to keep them at a near zero amount. So with that being said, they were not going to touch them until 2024, but now it looks like 2023 they'll start making some necessary adjustments to those rates. So what we're now seeing is people are a little hesitant. People are a little hesitant to know what it is exactly that they should be doing. What's going on? What does that mean? Well, technically what that means is, and I've got a couple pictures for what that means for you. So this is the first one. So when we're talking about interest rate, the hiking of the interest rates, interest rates going up and all those kind of things, understanding what that means to you as a person and what that means to the economy are very important. So I've got two pictures that'll sort of walk through exactly what those are, and I want you to be very clear on what it is that is going on. But when we're talking about interest rates, the biggest thing is the stock market is a huge piece of what people look at when we think about interest rates. And why is that? Well, the biggest reason is the simple fact that stocks normally offer a better return, more consistent return than these near zero interest rates. If I can return, if an interest rate on a savings account pays me 0.25%, just throwing that out there, it pays 0.25%, but I can go to a mutual fund that's going to pay me, let's just spitball, say 2%. Well, I've got a 1.75% better return on my money if I throw that into that mutual fund. So what do people do? They take their money out of these savings accounts, they throw it into stock market, and they have a better return on their money, right? On their capital. So that's a huge piece. So when this was announced on the 16th, the biggest thing was you saw the market dump a little bit because people were like, well, all this is going to change, and you'll see, how this affects the economy, and that's a huge piece in the market. Now, will people buy? The market, will stabilize, all that kind of good stuff, but that's a huge piece. So people will start to, if interest rates go up, people will start to be able to put more money into a normal savings account, right? Still won't return what a stock market returns, but still better than, it's more secure, right? So there's two things when we talk about the hike on the interest rates. There's a couple things that I want to discuss, but first off, I want to compare the two. So I want to first look at what exactly this means right now. So from now until 2023, what does all of this mean? Well, if you look on the screen, and I'll walk you through some of the major highlights for those that are listening, but lower cost on borrowing. So loans are much cheaper when there's these low interest rates. That's easily identifiable, right? You have a decline in the real value of savings. So if inflation is higher than the interest rate, your value of your savings account is actually declining because of what you can get for your dollar is less than what it's growing, right? It's not keeping up with the rate of inflation. I've talked about that on previous episodes, and that's just another reiteration. And asset prices could rise as cheap to borrow. So borrowing money or using credit cards or loans or whatever, that can lead to demand going up and costs continuing. to rise, causing inflation. For the economy, though, looking at the economy side, it creates an inflation pressure, right? It creates this inflationary pressure that pushes cost up. In theory, this should boost economic growth, but it's only up to a certain extent. And once that inflation happens, we flip over and what the federal government does, and that's what they talked about in their meeting, is they'll hike up the interest rates in 2023. And when you see that happen, what they are doing is now trying to control the economy and get it back in line, right? So that'll move me over to my next spot. What happens when that occurs? Well, personally, you will increase the cost of borrowing money. So anything that you've done in the past to borrow money, that will come at an increased cost. You will have higher mortgage interest payments. You will have increased costs of bank loans. Once again, just borrowing money costs more money, and this can obviously affect a lot of people that have better credit history, better payment history, whatever. They can still get decent rates, but for people that don't, they still need that if they're trying to purchase with borrowed money, that can cost them a lot. So on the economy, though, your currency will be valued more because it's going to start to deflate the currency. So this sort of slows down economic growth, right? This sort of pulls that inflation back and gets it back to where it needs to be. The problem is that as businesses begin to lose money because of the decrease in demand, because of the higher cost, you could see unemployment begin to rise again, and that's what a lot of economic experts are estimating, is that this sort of COVID rehab and boom of the economy could cause another recession after the fact. So we'll see. So that's just a couple pictures that sort of go over exactly what it is that you can expect, and I think that's a clear guidance on how this whole thing is going to play out. So what can you do? You see all this happen in your life. You see everyone talking about it, but what can you do as an individual? I'm not a financial advisor to sit here and tell you this is what you need to do in your situation with your money, but here's some of the things I can tell you that you can do to take advantage of this economy, and then best prepare yourself. So first off is don't stop making deposits into your investments. So the whole idea behind dollar cost averaging is to where you put in money at the lows and you put in money at the highs. So that's important, right? Because in this situation, if the market does, correct and come down or whatever, you've got to keep putting money in there because you've got to get in some good entry points at lower cost. And that's the whole point, is those lower costs then will grow and they'll make up a lot of your losses. You'll actually make more in that sense. So no matter what the market does, don't stop funding those 401ks. Don't stop funding those IRAs. Don't stop funding those mutual funds. Don't stop. Just keep investing. It all pays off in the long run, okay? Another thing you can do is you can take advantage of the lower interest rates while they're here. So up until 2023, federal government saying that they're most likely going to keep rates lower interest rates. So take advantage of that through refinancing. If your home has a higher than normal higher than the going rate interest rate, refinance the home. Keep the same term left on the loan. So if you have 20 years left on the loan, just refinance with another 20-year loan. Another thing you can do is pay off the debt while the credit card rates are lowered. You can always call your credit card company and let them know that that you're struggling or whatever to pay these debts. See if they'll lower your rate if it hasn't been lowered already. But it's just important to take advantage of these things, okay? And then the other thing you can do is start really pounding out those student loans. So up until I think September, they have a halt on student loan interest. Really knock those things out. Knock a lot of that principal down while these interest rates are down as well. So with that, I hope this was sort of a wake-up call. But the big thing about inflation, the big thing about all of this is the simple fact that we've got to get our economy under control, because right now the inflation is a real thing. You saw it on the percentages, 5%. So everything that you used to enjoy now costs roughly on average 5% more. So it's important to understand that, because all this stuff, all these policies, all these things that come into effect, there's a lasting price that everyone pays. It's not this whole pay your fair share and all this. Everyone eats the cost of this economy. So when all this stuff happens, I know there's pushes and there's pulls from all directions of people wanting to adjust and make, try to course correct this whole pandemic recovery. But the big thing is everyone pays for decisions that affect the entire economy, whether that be in your retirement account, whether that be in your brokerage account, whether that be in your savings account, whether that be wherever, your loans, whatever. So keep that in mind. It's very important. But thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Go out, share this video with 2 people. If you're listening to this on the podcast, truly appreciate it. Helps out if you hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment. Written comments are always beneficial. It helps spread the word to more and more people, whether that be on YouTube, Facebook, or wherever you enjoy your podcast. Leaving those written comments are great for building the community and just continuing to grow. So I appreciate it. I hope you got something out of this, some great info from this episode. Until next week, peace.